Hi, everyone. Dean Chris, Straight Talk on Leadership. Glad to be with you this week. This is going to be a really fun topic we're going to talk about in this week's episode. I'm going to be talking about why we should listen to ourselves sometimes. Now, you notice I had a big pause right in there because sometimes when we listen to ourselves is not the best thing, especially when we want to talk about improvement, because sometimes when we listen to ourselves, we go the easy route. So, folks, hope you enjoy this episode. As we always say, sit back, turn up your volume. You're ready to change your life. On. Hi, everybody. Dean Chris back in the studio this week. I'm joined again by Kelly Corvin, the Business Development Coordinator, our Business Director of LHLN. If you don't know what that is, that's Leaders Helping Leaders Network. If you want to look on the website, you can go to lhln.org. And look at all the exciting things we've got. Been really busy at the first of the year here. This is January 2021. A lot of things going on, and we're just looking at the landscape of leadership and figuring out how do we help people become the best versions of themselves. And this podcast is really a part of that. It's a really big part for us where we get to give you content that we may not be able to get always in a classroom, or sometimes you can't make it to a classroom. So we want to continue that learning process with our podcast. And we have one goal at LHLN: to make you the best version of yourself, both in your personal life and your leadership life. And if you don't believe that, all you got to do is go to one of our classes, look at our website, look at our material, and you'll see that we're really interested in helping you become the best that you can be. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, being the best that you can be, yeah, everybody can do it, but just not for everybody sometimes. Some people just like to settle in the same old, if you will. They kind of look at the world from the same perspective, and they don't really push themselves. Well, here we believe you're going to truly live the best life you can live, that we certainly know you have a limited time on this earth. And then when you draw it down even further, you have a limited time of influence, that you're going to be able to influence people in a personal setting, professional setting with leadership. Man, that time is short. You got to make the most of it. So what we hope to get out of this podcast is to show you and help you with some challenges you got. And this podcast is really birthed from scar tissue. It's birthed from, things we've seen in the real world, things I've experienced, things I've read about, thought about, to try to help you. And what I want to be is that conduit of information to help you become the best version of yourself. We got some exciting things going on. We are the book, Essential Leadership Lessons from the Thin Blue Line, which is a rewrite of the book that I wrote 4 years ago. And I took a look at that book not long ago, and I said, oh my God, there are so many things in here that I want to add. There are so many things that I've learned over the last bit. So instead of just writing a new book, I took that sucker and I just rewrote it with the help of Kelly, who did the editing. We've got a new publisher. We're pushing that book out to you. And I'll tell you, if anything, it's designed for 3 areas of your life: how to help yourself, how to help others become their best, and how to help your organization become the best. That book's written. If I literally were to start my leadership life over again, I would love to have a book like that would tell you some of those things really quickly on what you should be doing to fast forward your leadership. So, folks, we hope you pick up a copy of that. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. You can go to our website and buy it from our bookshop. And if you want bulk orders more than 10, contact Kelly at lhln.org or Kay Corvin at lhln.org, and she can get you the book pricing and that. So, Kelly, I'm going to welcome you to the show. I'm really excited about doing this podcast today. Oh, my goodness. You know what? I'm really excited about doing it. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for agreeing to join me and give some flavor to my conversation and help these folks not just listen, to me talking and, trying to do all the talking. So thank you very much for joining us.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's always fun. I think we prompt each other's thought process, so it usually makes for an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and we hope the listeners. I'm not really interested in the conversation with you because I tend to have a conversation with you about 74 times a day, which is pretty normal, which is great.
I don't know if our listeners think that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I know, right? But we do want our listeners to kind of, when we do think about these things, and I do use you to bounce ideas off of, and I do use you in thought process of, and we use each other in helping each other become the best version that we can. And we certainly have had some challenges with the COVID. We've had challenges with when you do any type of business, when you do anything out there public, or you do anything to really try to help people, you want to start an internal battle within yourself, but also an internal battle with just the world. The world is designed, folks, to tell you no. So I want you to go ahead and get that out and put it right on the table. I guarantee you right now, I want you, if you don't believe me, this is what I want you to do. I want you to think of some wild and crazy thing that you want to do. I'm serious. And it don't even have to be wild and crazy. Just think about something new you want to do. And I guarantee you, you go to 4 people and tell them you're going to do it. Almost 4 out of them, almost 100% of them, 5 of them, go to 5, go to 10. You will see an overwhelming majority of them will tell you, you can't do it. And that's just the way the world's designed. We instantly look at things, we say, we can't do that. I don't know if it's a cautionary tale. I guess it is, but it really stops us a lot of times, which if you talk about segueing into it, this is why I say it. Today, I want to have fun with this episode. It says why we should listen to ourselves, pause, sometimes. Because sometimes we shouldn't listen to ourselves. Sometimes we should look at the situation and say, we can do better than that. Sometimes we can look at the situation and say, I'm better than that. But sometimes we just listen to ourselves and it puts us in a trap, puts us in this cycle, you know? And, Kelly, we talk about this thing. I designed this thing called self-talk cycle.
Yes,
And
definitely.
yeah, if you, okay, here's what I want y'all to do is imaginary in your mind now, the listeners out there, I wanted you to imagine a circle. All right. And the reason I make it circular is because the self-talk cycle is continuous. All right. So I want you to put in the left top corner self-talk. All right. And then I want you to put in the right or top corner self-image. And then at the bottom, I want you to put performance. And here's what I want you to understand about that. What's interesting is what we say to ourselves tends to create an image of what we are.
Correct.
And then that image tends to create an expectation of performance. So, which it means you self talk up here, then you listen to yourself, and then you create this image of what you are. Either you can or you can't. And then your performance is directly related to how you see yourself and how you see the situation. So, when you look at self talk cycle, and this is a big part of it, sometimes we don't need to listen to ourselves when that negative self talk is so compelling or so influential that we have a tendency to get us off course. One thing I like to say about, and I want to make this comparison, people, so they understand about leadership. I want you to understand this about leadership. I want you to understand this about your organization, and I want you to understand this about your life. Okay. So yourself, your others, and organization. I want you to really understand this. 99% of the time, you're off course. It's just like flying an airplane. If you take off today in an airplane and that pilot is flying that plane and he takes off in a southern direction, well, and you need to go north, he's got to change the direction for you to go north. So you just can't keep flying south. And a lot of times people don't realize that their life is off course and they've got to self-direct, or the organization's off course and they have to self-direct that sucker all the time. That's why a lot of times autopilot was put in, because flying a plane is a lot of times just staying on course. Right. And what happens is autopilot lets the pilot do other things. And so unfortunately, some of you think you're on autopilot when you're actually heading for a crash. You're on an autopilot to a crash, if you will. And that could be in your life, whatever it is, you got to really look at that and say, how do I self-direct this course? How do I really get back on this course where I need to go? And people have to understand, if you want to get better, you got to self-correct. And it's not one time, it's all the time. And so imagine a plane flying off course 99.9% of the time and the pilot directing that course. Well, that's the same thing with you in your personal life. That's the same thing in your professional life. And remember, you should listen to yourself, but just sometimes. Because if you listen to yourself all the time, you'll get lazy, you get comfortable, you get complacent, you'll believe stuff that ain't true. You'll start just, I guarantee you, I could ask our audience right now, Kelly, I could say, take a really stop what you're doing, take an introspective look at something you really want to be good in. And I guarantee you could look at yourself and say, oh my God, if I'm going to be good at this, I got to change a bunch of this stuff. But sometimes we don't listen. We don't listen. We listen to ourselves. We don't see the signs of where we're trying to go. So with that being said, we need to listen to ourselves. And honestly, the person we listen to all the time is ourselves. But sometimes our own advice is not good advice.
Well, isn't that something that I know you make this point in class a lot, that there's something I always apply the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 model from the Italian philosopher. And that something like 80% of our thoughts in any given day are negative. So that will tend to create that self-talk cycle. If you are saying something negative to yourself about another person, about a task you have to perform, about yourself, then chances are that's going to create that image in your brain, which leads to the performance as the result.
Yeah, let me say something about that. Studies have shown that 85 to 90% of what you do is because of subconscious behavior, which means that you don't really realize you're doing it, but you're doing it. Like in the morning when you get ready, I guarantee you that everybody has a pattern in the morning they follow. And it's the reason why we'll eat the same thing for breakfast, but we won't eat the same thing for dinner. Because we'll eat the same thing for breakfast because in the morning your mind is trying to get you out of the house and to get ready for your day. So you subconsciously settle for what's familiar with you. And that's why you won't eat the same thing for dinner every night. Well, some people do, but a lot of people don't like to have the same thing for dinner, but they'll have the same damn thing for breakfast in the morning because subconsciously they're really focused on moving and getting out of the house and having convenience become the rule because it settles you that day to believe everything's gonna be okay. I mean, the last thing you want is to make decisions on what you're gonna eat for breakfast because it tends to screw your whole day up. Does that make sense? And God,
Well,
I
no,
know.
absolutely. And in fact, it's jogging my memory. I've been on a weight loss journey now for about 3 months. And one of the things that this particular nutritionist is very emphatic about is that you listen to these subliminal meditation tapes, because what she's trying to get you to do is to rewire your thought process about diet and exercise and everything else. And you don't even realize it's happening. You'll hear the main voice, but then in the background there's like a little quieter voice. And it's fascinating how it does work. It does start to make you think. I'm not saying it's conscious yet, but obviously there's triggers that are going on where you don't eat that thing that you might have automatically eaten every day after dinner. Those type of things.
And
So I believe it.
Well, I mean, we wire ourselves to make life easy. And then once we wire ourselves to how we think life is easy, sometimes those things we wire ourselves with are not productive. They're not good. They're not whatever it is, but we won't argue with breakfast because we want a clean kind of way of entering the day. And we don't want to muck it up with making decisions that then start our day off bad. So we like to do that because subconsciously, because we're more focused about getting where we need to get to than we are where we are. All right. So at dinner, we're more focused on where we are, not what we're trying to get to. Does that make sense? So when you look at subconsciously, the subconscious mind is so powerful. It is so, and what I want to talk to people about is that you probably are doing some subconscious things as leaders that you don't even realize. And, I want you to really start at the end of this or near the end, I'm going to give you some tips on when do you listen to yourself and how do you listen to yourself? Okay. So, I want people to realize I'm going to talk about, you should listen to yourselves sometimes, but sometimes you shouldn't. I'm going to talk about, well, when you're not supposed to be listening to yourself, what do you do to fix that? So I'm not going to leave people just hanging out there, but I want you to realize that 85 to 90% of what we do is subconscious behavior. Now, you talked about negative thoughts. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of negative thoughts and negative things subconsciously planted in our brain. Like, when somebody says they're going to do something, we have the tendency to say, They can't do that. Why can't I do that? We don't generally say, oh my God, that's so exciting. I can't wait to hear the results. You'll look at them and say, really? Let me know how that turns out. I mean, you don't have that real same enthusiasm for them, right? That's a negative subconscious planning, and the book, Seven Mindsets, and I forget the authors of that book, but they did a study and they found
Yeah.
that people have about 65,000 thoughts a day. So you think about this. How many times a day do I listen to myself? Oh my God, 65 freaking thousand thoughts a day. And they did find that 80% of those were negative, which is crazy, which means that we're subconsciously programming ourselves to be kind of negative. Now, here's what happens when you just tend to listen to your subconscious behavior. Now, I'm not trying to tell you not to listen to it, but when you really want to be the best, sometimes you're not going to be able to listen to your subconscious behavior unless you develop such good habits within that subconscious behavior that it's putting you on a track to get where you need to get to. Think about this for a second. Most of us in life are on a speedway of life. And what I mean by that is that we're in a circle. We're not really like in a straight line from birth to death. We tend to do some things so patternistically that we get in the same rut so long that you have a tendency to, get stuck in a rut, right? So you get in this rut. If we were on a drag strip from start to end of life, it'd be much better than being on a speedway, because in a speedway, you're seeing the same scenery a lot. It's why, you're talking about subconscious, you don't know the stuff you're saying sometimes. This is my all-time pet peeve thing for people to say. I hate it with a passion, but I hate when people say same old, same old. I hate it. And why I hate it is because I know what it does to your subconscious mind. It's literally telling you that nothing's going to ever change and it's always going to be the same. If that's the case, your life is headed to be very boring, very non-productive in other people's lives. You might get tasks done every day, but I'm going to tell you something. I want you to think about this, Kelly. All right. If you say same old, you know what you're telling me? That your life's work will never amount to anything.
I had muted it because Mocha is making his voice known in the neighborhood. I also, when I hear people say that, or when I hear myself say that, it's basically an excuse to not be creative and to not find a different solution.
Well, it's true. It does lower the expectations for people. The second you, the second that when somebody says that, you lower the expectations of them. Like you're like, oh, okay, then I expect nothing from you because it's the same old, And I've seen 20-year-old, literally 20 and 21-year-old kids in rookie school have conversations with them where I say, how's it going today, buddy? Same old, same old. And I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, you are like a hamster in a wheel. You do not realize you are patterning yourself to a life of mediocrity, but also to a life to where your significant work is never going to matter. What a death sentence. You talk about a freaking death sentence. For me, would be for somebody to say, my entire life's work never really amounted to anything other than the same old, same old. Well,
absolutely.
I don't want to live like that.
No.
I don't want, and our leaders shouldn't be living like that. I guarantee you one thing right now, the people that you you're working with, that you lead, I guarantee you they say, damn, I don't want the same old, same old. I don't want a leader who comes in and says same old, same old. I want a leader who comes in and says, let's make the best day we had. Let's make it. Let's make tomorrow better. I'm a firm believer, and over the last several months, we're kind of really biting into this concept called +1, meaning that definitely, in all significant areas of our life, we want to make it a +1. And you and I are starting to use that talk when we open the daily. We're like saying, all right, we're going to make this a +1. And I swear to gosh, it's starting to make a difference in us. It really is. And
It
so
immediately changes your mindset. It really
really
does.
does, really does. And one of the things I want to, which reminds me, if you haven't if you haven't joined our 21-day challenge, we're going to be running those several times a year. We really want you
Mhm.
to get into it. We're in day 11 now
That is
of our,
correct. Yes.
and we're really pushing forward with a group of people, about
Well,
probably
and the
about
best
12
thing
of us.
about, yeah, there's about 12 core. We had about 20 that started, and we knew we would lose some folks for various reasons. But what's
I guess
really
they
been
went back
awesome
to
about
same
it
old,
is,
same old.
yeah, well, people get busy, or they think they understand what it's going to be about, but then they really don't. But the best part about it has been the sense of community that it's created. We definitely want to keep that going even after the 21-day challenge is over, I think.
Yeah, I get it. And the one thing that, I want to say this right now. I want to say this, and you just said something right there. And I want to say this. I'm telling you right now, the enemy of your progress and the enemy of state is called busy. So let's just get that out of the way. When you are too busy, when you're busy, a lot of us are just busy enough to be good, but we're too dang big. We're not busy enough to be great. That's that's the problem. We're too big. We're just busy enough to be good, but we're not busy enough to be great. We should do that. And so when we think about those things, so one of the things that happens to you is when you subconsciously begin to think about things is you don't really listen to yourself. You just react. And that can be very troublesome. And I was not good at that when I was a young leader. I was more of a reactor and not a listener. And, I guess that I listened to my subconscious mind sometime and let it trigger me. When you have emotional hijacking, you tend to react and not listen. So listen, sometimes you shouldn't listen to yourself. And that's one of the times when you really need to think, when you need to be thought provoking, when you need to make good decisions. Sometimes you got to back up and not react. You need to respond. When you tend to respond, you're listening to the good self. And so I want to make sure about it. And what listening to yourself does when you create bad habits, it causes what I call autonomic or automatic responses. And those are things that just happen because you're in the habit of doing those. Let me tell you what this does to you. When you listen to yourself continually in these negative thoughts and these negative things, you tend to get stuck. And I said hamster wheel a minute ago, but I'll make it even better for human beings is you get stuck on the Ferris wheel of life, which means that yes,
That's a good one.
well, the Ferris wheel of life is your position does change, but the scenery really doesn't.
Right.
You follow me? It's like you get on this thing and then you start convincing yourself at every segment of that it's different or it's better, but it's just the same old, right?
Right.
You
Right.
get stuck on the Ferris wheel of life. And sometimes you got to get off of that. You just have to get off the damn Ferris wheel and you say, look, man, I am so stuck in this rut of doing things that I guarantee you when you start a project and you say, I can't do it, 99% of the time you can't.
Well,
It
isn't
doesn't
it,
really
wasn't
matter.
it, was it Thomas Edison? I think that's attributed with the quote that the next great idea or every great idea started with the phrase, it can't be done.
I don't know.
I think it
I
was
mean,
him or one of the other great inventors of the 19th century,
that's a
early
good
20th
that's a
century.
good comment, but I mean, I really like that. And one of the things that autonomic responses do to us is they tend to convince us they're good because we do them so much that we tend to think that's a good thing. Like, let me give you an example of one. If you're brushing your teeth wrong, you have a tendency to believe that that's good until you find out you got all rotten teeth. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yes, or receding gums or some other issue with
well,
your
you've done it so long that
dangerous
you've
habit.
convinced yourself it's good, and it becomes so. Once we think we got a habit, we think that's a good thing because your body's making it really easy when you form these habits, and you have a tendency to believe they're good, even though it may not be the best way to do it. So it's like I guess the lesson I'm saying is even if you're brushing your teeth, you ought to be examining, are you doing it the right way?
Mhm.
It's like you have to listen to yourself sometimes, but then other times you have to step back and say, man, I really need to listen to something else here. So
So I
that's kind of
have
the point.
So I have a question as I've been listening to you talk about this it reminds me of another article that I listened to, and you may have heard about it. It's called The Gift of Fear. And it's those gut reactions you have. I'm sure that officers probably experience this on more of a daily basis than anybody else does in a profession. But it basically, I guess what I'm asking is, what's the distinction? Like, is that the sometimes when you listen to yourself, when you have that visceral physical reaction that maybe this isn't going quite as it should, or there's something wrong with this situation, and how that differentiates from the conscious and subconscious in your brain that's telling you to do certain kind of automatic functions, if you will. I guess I'm just
Well,
trying to understand that
police
distinction.
training, I mean, they spend a lot of time in police training getting people to be reactionary, which forms habits, which help save their
Mhm.
lives. And those are all things that are, you can't argue with. Those are things when you should listen to yourself. And 90% of the time you should be listening to yourself because you're forming habits that are good, and you got all these things. But the one thing that happens, and let's talk about when you shouldn't listen to yourself. You shouldn't listen to yourself when you're really trying to be the best you can be. And people are going to say, well, oh my God, that doesn't make any sense. Well, who the hell should I listen to? Well, you should listen to yourself, but you should listen to a inner self that's deeper than the normal habit forming self. Okay. And that voice we don't listen to a lot because it creates this fight within ourselves. Your brain will say, well, don't do that because I'm comfortable. But
Like a rationalization.
yeah, exactly. It rationalizes, well, that's comfortable. Like, okay, I'll give you a good example. Like I went to the gym today, and I've been going on this 21-day challenge to push myself every day, not trying to kill myself. And I knew I had to change my workout up, or I'd be the same that I was before. And so if I'd listened to myself this morning when I went to the gym, I'd have went straight to the treadmill. I'd have did my regular time on that, then straight to doing what I did, and then I walked out of the gym. But I knew that my body was telling me you need to switch up a little bit. So I did no real cardio today. And I went to those machines over there where you pull those pull downs, and I did push-ups and
Yeah.
all those things. I stretch. I did a lot of stretching today. I just I listened to that inner self of saying, don't come in here and do the same thing you do every day. And in reality, that pushes me past that 1% to make my body better. But your body will tell you that what you did yesterday was good,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's like David
Because your
Goggins.
body likes habit, right? I mean,
Let's
your body.
examine one of the world's greatest that never listens to themselves, David Goggins.
Yeah.
If you follow David Goggins, the Navy SEAL, the second he becomes good at something, or the second he becomes comfortable doing anything, he changes it up. He listens to that inner voice that drives him to his best performance. Now, none of us can be like him. I ain't running 100 miles. Matter of fact, I ain't even running a marathon. And I ain't spending 24 hours a day running. But David Goggins has gotten his point to where he pushes himself. He listens to that voice of becoming the best version of himself in all areas, right? And but if you look at his personal life, and not to be negative on him or anything like that, his personal life suffers because he listens to that voice of improvement so much in that area. You follow me?
Mhm.
So you have to kind of balance your views of what you are, and you got to use balance. But if you ever want to get better, you're going to have to listen to not the voice of commonality, not the voice of comfort. You've got to listen to that voice of you that moves you to another level. Now, there's two self. Now, listen, this is what I want to say about this podcast. There's two selves. There's real self and ideal self. Now, I didn't come up with that. Daniel Goleman did. And he wrote that in the book called Primal Leadership. He says that when people have a tendency to present themselves, they will present their ideal self before they will ever present their real self. And if you don't believe that's true, sit in the damn job interview. Because when you're in a job interview, people are giving you their ideal self. Now, ideal is what you want to be, real is who you are. Sometimes you can fool yourself in believing you're that ideal self because your habits convince you that's what you're doing. But the reality is that that's not what's happening. You have listen, this is something I want people to think about. Now, listen, pay attention out there. You hear me? Pay attention. We create the mindset sometime that is not very good for us because we overstate a lot of times our abilities or where we are. You follow me? So instead of moving ourselves forward, we convince ourselves where we're at is really good. Okay. Now, that's a problem because it kind of develops into a habit of getting you just on the surface being marginal. Now, if you're really going to push yourself, I talk about the 4 pillars of leadership, and one of them is self-reflection.
Yes.
And when you self-reflect, it's just like I did today at the gym. And why I always talk about physical is because in physical, you can see results fairly quickly. In professional life, it might take you years to really see, which I don't have time to talk about, but I created this thing called the illusion of success, which means that a lot of leaders believe that if I have a conversation with somebody, I ought to see immediate results. Sometimes that ain't happening. Matter of fact,
Or they think that
99%
is
of the
the
time,
success, that they've
it
had the conversation and
never happens. Anecdotal conversation with people don't help a damn thing. So, just period. When you have an anecdotal conversation, somebody tell them how you feel or telling them what they need to be doing, unless you have follow up and change the expectations and change the habits, nothing's going to change. So let's just put that in perspective. You just feel good because you had a conversation. But the point I'm making is that our real self is who we are. Our ideal self is what we really want to be. So think about this. When we go to sleep at night, that's our real self. What we dream about is our ideal self.
yeah.
Okay. And so you got to come to you got to come to how do I connect those two? Right. And you never will connect them. But what you do, that was, remember that movie? What was that? Young Frankenstein or whatever that was?
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Young Frankenstein.
Most of the
Great
audience won't
movie.
even know what that. They'll be like, what the hell is he talking about? But what you do is that you shrink the gap.
Mhm.
See, so that's the goal every day, is shrinking the gap, not ever becoming the ideal self. You'll never become your ideal self. So knock that off. It's an unrealistic goal. And plus, being the best that you can be is a damn journey, not a destination anyway.
That's right.
So you just shorten the gap. So the only way to change and close that gap, and that's what we're talking about when you really should listen to yourself, is you start closing that gap. And what do you do? So how do you do it? And let's help our audience here. I
Great.
know they're probably ready for me to shut up and just give them some tips. And so here's where we go with that. And I'll do it. First is you got to formulate your GPS. What that means is you got to know where you are now. And you got to be honest with yourself. So let me tell you one way to do it. And this is easy, simple, not that big a deal. All you got to do is take significant areas of your life. All right. Let's say for me, if I was going to talk about, let's talk about my professional life, all right? Where I want to be as a leader or where I want to be as a leader influencer. Okay. So I'm not that much a leader anymore, but I'm a leader influencer.
Correct.
All right. So, and people got to remember, if you're a leader, you're also a leader influencer. But I'm swayed way to the right of leadership influencer now versus leadership, right? Because I don't give all that up, except leading you and leading me and leading our team.
Our team. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and what you got to understand about that is you're never going to be perfect, all right? And so with us, one of the things we found is that, we sell the product of leadership influencer and helping leadership get better. That's our product. That's what we do. That's what we do. And you can never be perfect in your product. You always strive to be the best you can be. And that's one of the things that is great about our company is we don't ever try to be perfect. We just try to be, really great at what we're doing. So if I were to take leadership influencer, right? And I'd say, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to score where you want to be on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 meaning you're John Maxwell level, man, you're up there. You're having these national meetings, people listen to you. You got thousands and thousands of listeners. Leadership influence, man, that's John Maxwell stuff right there, right? That's Tony Robbins stuff. That's right there. So right, it's 10, right? All right, now, where do you really think you are? Okay, so slide that scale from 1 to 10, slide it. 5. Then what I want you to do, step back. And I want you to subtract 25% of where you think you are, because that's the reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in
So
those significant
where
areas
do
of
you
your
think
life,
you are?
well, I mean, honestly, if I were to say with me, I'm a 5. Okay. And if you look at leadership influence and then you subtract that, I'm a 3.5 or a 4. You know, so what does that do? Hell, that gives me a lot of room to improve.
Sure.
So,
That's a positive.
but I guarantee you, John Maxwell, I guarantee John Maxwell would do the same thing. He would rate himself a 5, 6, 7, 8. But in reality, his influence, depending on what people would see, if I've really helped somebody, they may rate me higher. But I didn't ask you to get other people's rating. I asked you what yours was, because that's what matters.
Right.
Is where you're trying to go. Don't ever listen to this. You help somebody and they tell you the greatest thing since sliced bread, you better look out. Because for everyone that tells you help them, they 10 somewhere out there that said you killed them. So, you know, and I always say this, if you believe the 5s or the 10s, you got to believe the 1s.
That's right.
Yeah, you got to. And so when you look at that, this is what I want people to do. Is know where you're at. Get your GPS moment, slide that scale and say, all right, here's where I am. Now, realistically, this is what I want you to do. Realistically, in the next several months, the next month, where can I slide this scale?
Such as like a 21-day challenge for yourself.
Yes. Now, where can I slide that scale? Now, if I slide that scale to 5 or 4.7, 4.8, man, I'm +1 in it every day. Okay. So when you do that, you're on the +1 side. I really need to do a podcast on +1. You know what, Kelly?
We do.
Well,
that's a great idea.
We'll do one soon here on +1 so we can get people in this +1 thing. So anyway, you got to know where you are. And that's a good way to judge where you are. Okay. And you got to be honest with yourself. And then as you slide that scale, you got to realize, what do I have to remove that keeps me from moving forward? Like, I'm not talking about the small things. I'm talking about those things that are just stopping you dead in your tracks. Like, a lot of times people pump the brakes when they should push the gas. You know, that would be an example of, you know, okay, let me give you an example. Trina Segreto, right?
Yes.
Trina, and Trina, I hope to shout out to you. I hope you're listening to the podcast. She's in our 21-day challenge. She's from
one
Palm
of our
Beach.
rock stars in there too.
Yeah, she's from Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. And Trina was talking about the other day about finally just doing her own wellness business and getting out there and doing it. Well, for years, Trina had been pumping the brakes. And so she took that master presenter course in August. And, you know, that master presenter course really that we did, you know, LHLN, we did the master presenter in Palm Beach.
One of our more popular classes.
Now, I'm not making this up. She told us the other day, if you want to watch it on the record, go to the 21-day challenge. And she said it. She said that course really changed my life and made me move ahead of things I knew I needed to do. So what she do? She stopped pumping the brakes.
Right.
See, how many things in life do y'all know? I'm challenging every one of y'all out there. How many of y'all in life are not doing something because you're pumping the brakes and you're pushing the gas? So you got to know where you are, and you got to remove those things that are impasses to you moving to that next level, right? And
that's right.
And if you ain't willing to do that, then hey, jump off the podcast, or you know, just you got to do it. Don't expect any different. You know, all right.
Absolutely.
Number 4, you got to be ready for subconscious warfare. So the second you start, this is what this week I've been working on my diet a little bit and trying not to eat a bunch of junk and doing this and doing that, you know. And I swear to you that ice cream or donuts or sweets just seem like they taste 75,000% better. I'm like craving them more, and I'm like, oh my God, they are the greatest thing since. That's psychological warfare.
Yeah.
You walk by chocolate and you're like, oh my God, if
Yeah.
I just
Subconscious
took
warfare.
if I just took a bite of that, that'd be the best thing. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd be like, oh my God, if I could just sniff chocolate, it'd be good. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
psychological warfare is you believe the things that you used to do, they're better than what you thought they were.
that's right.
You know what I mean? I mean, you're like, because you ain't got them now, you're like, oh my God, if I could just have a bite of a donut. Or, and I'm not a donut person. If anybody's ever worked for me, they know I can't stand cops and donuts. I hate those combinations, but I'm
But
just
there's
using
always
it.
something that calls your name that you just think you can't live without.
Well,
Yeah.
those Intenemans, I believe those chocolate
Mhm.
donuts, it's got the real chocolate with the chocolate frosting and all that stuff.
Oh
Those
yeah.
things are like crack to me.
Yeah.
And Kim bought some the other day and brought them home. I was like, what are you doing that for? I'm trying not to eat that stuff. I walk by them, and since they've been in the kitchen and I can see them, I've walked by them and they are calling my name. Subconscious warfare.
Dang.
Yeah, I know. They're like, take a bite, man. These are good. You
Just
know,
one bite.
and I got my stepmother living with me now. And hell, I've been giving them to her because she likes them and she's not really worried about her because she weighs about 100 pounds. She's not worried about her diet, nothing like
He's such a
that.
tiny thing. Yeah.
Yeah, she's tiny. So and I feed them to her, and then I put one in my hand. I'm like, oh my God, just take a bite. You know what I mean? It's like it's great. So when you're going to change and when you're going to shrink that gap between real and ideal self, what you want to be, you better be ready for psychological warfare, and it's going to occur within yourself, and it's crazy.
Absolutely.
You ain't lying. Number 5 is see the end result. You've got to see where you're trying to go, and it's not a destination. I said that earlier, but see the journey improving you.
Well,
Okay.
and visualization, I think, helps too. That's where you have to visualize kind of where you want to, where your goal is in order to subconsciously start setting your mind to get there
Yeah, no
on that
doubt.
journey.
No doubt. You got to see where, and the one thing I wanted to say to people is that here's what really you have to take an identity, you have to look at things differently from an identity perspective instead of a outcome perspective. All right. So
Mhm.
James Clear says that best in his book called Atomic Habits. He says that once we look at an identity, we see ourselves in an identity, and the out of that is the outcomes. Like, for example, if I set a goal, I want to lose 20 pounds. Okay. That's the outcome. And then the process determines how you do that, right? So
Right.
most of us look at outcomes and processes, which processes are very, 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 very important in leadership. But we don't change our identity. If you see yourself as a skinny person, you change the way you eat.
Hmm.
If you see yourself as a fat, skinny person, you just are skinny for a period of time and you're going to get fat again. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, as
Right.
a leader, you got to see yourself as an influencer of people where you're really trying to change the organization, change people, and you got to see your identity as that. Most of the people out there in our world, in law enforcement world, and we know we're expanding and getting people out into other segments, but in the law enforcement world, they equate their identity with their rank, and they tend to stop their identity based upon what their rank is. So, in other words, they think they're a sergeant, they think like a sergeant,
Hmm.
but really ought to be getting them their identity to be acting like the chief, right? In their mind. And so that's a whole new another podcast.
Absolutely. No,
But
I think that even happens in the civilian world, Dean, is a lot of people will um, associate their identity with whatever their current position is without looking past that. The ones that really are successful are the ones that see themselves in that chief's position or in that manager position, and they work toward that.
well, a
You're
lot
a
of
perfect
people are what I
example.
call a lot of people I call are leadership losers. And they're leadership losers because they have a tendency to cut people off based on their rank. In other words, they'll tell a sergeant, stay in your lane or think like, that's not your role. That's a leadership loser who does that.
Right.
Because a real leadership winner is somebody who wants all the ideas, the best ideas.
Yeah.
So, and then the last one I want to talk about is if you're really going to change your pattern, you got to have small victories along the way, because subconscious warfare, you will never win unless you have small victories. So your brain desires small victories. You have to feed yourself dopamine, which in turn helps create oxytocin, which in turn helps create a feeling of good, feeling good about yourself. And if you don't have small victories along the way, you won't. That's why a lot of times people are in such negative cycles, is because they've let the people around them convince them there's no way that's going to get better. And they get into this no small victories during the day.
Mhm.
And that's really something you ought to really pay
No,
attention.
I totally believe that. In fact, that's one of the things that I have been practicing in this 21-day challenge, as you know, is just getting better organized, because we've added so many things to our repertoire that just making sure I'm being the traffic cop that you've hired me to be. And one of the things I've started practicing is, it's actually, I attribute it to Michael Hyatt, Free to Focus. And he says that on any given day, somebody will have 15 or 20 things they think they're going to get done in that daytime. And then they don't get it done. They know it's just so overwhelming that they just shut down. And he said the better thing to do is to pick those 3 things that you absolutely know you need to get done. And then tell yourself at the end of those 3, it's a successful day. Now, anything on top of that is just icing on the cake, if you will. So I do think that's a really good thing. And in my planner that I have, you actually can set, well, what's your reward for achieving these goals this week? So you kind of think ahead of time about what your goal is going to be and reward.
Well, let me say this, and it's time for us to close our
Yes, it
podcast
is.
out here. And let me say this about if you look at millennials, the one thing that they're really driven for is rewards, because it creates a dopamine addiction. And that's why they love the phones. And that's why we all love our phones, is because we get a text, we contact somebody back, we get to hear from them. That's a dopamine fix. That's something you go on a website, you learn something, that's a dopamine fix. And we're all so addicted to that reactionary dopamine fix that it's really changed the course of us as leaders, if you will. And you have to realize you're addicted to dopamine that gives you the reward feel. And dopamine's got some really good stuff in it because it drives you forward. It gets you moving past things. It gets you to see the end goal. You know, it's like when the cows see the barn at night, they know they're getting ready to be fed and they pick up their pace. It's the same kind of thing with us. When we see a reward, we pick our pace up, you know. That's why I
Sure.
always say to people that, when you show appreciation to people, and I wish I was really good at this, as I say, but if you really show appreciation for people, they will always exceed expectations. It's that dopamine hit, you got to have that stuff. All right, Kelly, I appreciate you joining the podcast with us today, man. Always a pleasure to get on here. And, we create these things as we think about them. And that's one of the reasons, that's one of the things I can always say about Dean Crisp on podcast. You ain't going to get the same format. You ain't going to get the same old, same old. If I don't feel inspired to create it, I don't do it. And so you know that as well, because you're always chasing me around saying, when are we going to do a podcast? Well, we're going to get all that done, because we know our listeners like our podcast. We appreciate it. Our numbers are showing that. Folks, if you liked our podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You'll be notified when a new episode drops. Try to drop them every week or 10 days. We try to keep focused on these. These are helping us grow, and we want them to help you grow. If we're helping you, let us know. If we're helping you, let somebody else know we're helping you. The only way we force multiply this is with you and us helping each other. And Leaders Helping Leaders Network, if you're on the YouTube, you see it right behind my head there, LHLN. We don't just put that logo up, we believe it. We believe our goal is really to help leaders become the best version of themselves, because our people and the people we lead are so important. They're
Yes.
somebody's sons and daughters and mothers and brothers and sisters and uncles, and they're sons and daughters of America. And there's no more important challenge than to lead people in the direction. And there's nothing more fulfilling than finding the end result where people are better than they were when you started. Everybody's going to leave a footprint. Let me ask you what yours is going to be. So, folks, with that, Kelly, again, thank you for joining us in today's show. I really do appreciate it. And, folks, like we always say, share the growth. Let people know you're being influenced by these podcasts. We want to see our numbers grow, and we want to make that a part of your challenge, too, is helping our numbers grow. Folks, thank you. As we always say on LHLN, keep sharing the growth. And until next time, I'm Dean Chris.